This is the TSC Podcast, where the most difficult leg of the triathlon becomes your friend, leaving your struggles and your competition behind you. TrySwimCoach.com, helping you to laugh at the water.
Welcome to TSC. This is Kevin, and this is episode number 108. So thanks for listening again. And in just a minute, Chris and I have a discussion with none other than Brad Kearns of the Primal Endurance Podcast. And I think it was a great discussion. We covered the topic of, is high-level triathlon training healthy? So whatever level you are at right now, does that even make sense? At whatever level you are right now, this is a really, really good podcast that we talk about a lot of important stuff when it comes to triathlon training, fitness, and health. And if you are looking to get to the next level, I think this is the podcast for you. So I just wanted to say one thing before we get to that. So we have our series of emails, and if you sign up, you can go to tryswimlessons.com and get on our 3 emails that we have that are basically 3 videos describing 3 common mistakes that triathletes typically make in the water. And it took us a while to put those together. There's a lot of thought and effort that went into those. And they are swimming tips that are going to help you to take your swim and just move up to that next level where you are comfortable in the water and feeling good in the water. You're not struggling as much. So those are all free. You just go to tryswimlessons.com. But I wanted to mention, so about 2 weeks ago, I just started emailing a little bit more often and talking about, part of it is like personal stories that in my life, but they are applying to training, applying to swimming, applying to triathlon, and also just applying to life. So I really enjoy doing these, and I've gotten a lot of great feedback. So if you're interested in that, you can go ahead and get our 3 most common mistakes at TSC Lessons, and then you will get to enjoy my emails. They're not quite daily, but I send them on kind of a regular basis, so you get an idea of what's going on. Or you can just unsubscribe after you get the 3 lessons. No insult taken. I don't mind if you do that, but it's something that I think a lot of people are liking. And I try to keep them motivational and inspirational as much as possible. And so if you want to get on that, we'd love to have you. And then also, if you are enjoying this podcast, we'd love to hear from you. And if you can give us a rating and review on wherever you listen to this show, that would be awesome. A lot of people listen on iTunes, and you just have to open up your iTunes browser and you just search for TSC Podcast, and then we'll come up there, and you click on the rating and review, and we'd really appreciate that, and we'll read it off on the next show. So without further ado, here is our roundtable discussion with Brad Kearns. Have a great week and happy holidays. We'll probably be back to you sometime early next year. So happy holidays. Have a good one, and we'll talk to you soon. All right, welcome back to TSC. This is Kevin, and I am super excited today. We have a special show. Got a couple of guests on the show. One is assistant coach Chris Hague. Hey, Chris, how's it going?
It's going well, Kev.
Yeah, and then we have a special guest on the show, the host of the Primal Endurance Podcast, which is one of my favorites, and that is the legendary Brad Kearns. Brad, welcome to TSC.
Oh my, thank you for such a nice intro. And I'm looking forward to hitting it with you guys. We have a great topic teed up. So thanks for listening too.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So our topic, so the way this got started is Chris had written an article that got into this idea of having to sacrifice your health to perform in triathlon at a high level. And I'm going to read just part of his article just so we have some kind of reference here. Yeah. So I'm just going to read a quote, and then we can kind of go off from there on this, and we can just chime in at any time. So this is from Chris Hague. At some point, you do need to sacrifice your health if you want to get on top in triathlon, running, cycling, and most sports. It's sad to say, but it's true. If you are in the 1% and looking to take your game to the next level, then parts of you may need to sacrifice parts of your health for short periods of time. There is nothing healthy about training 25 to 35 hours a week, nor consuming 4,000 calories a day, nor avoiding or skipping social situations to prioritize training. However, for some people, that is what it takes to be the fastest and top 1%. There are some people who thrive on minimal training, but they are a small minority. certainly it is not sustainable. And these athletes have broken up their year into phases of intense training and recovery. Nevertheless, health is sacrificed at some point in the name of speed and competitive performance that is being faster than other people versus personal bests. So, who wants to go first? Well, actually, let's, Brad, why don't you give a little bit of your background, just talk a little bit about yourself, just in case some people out there haven't heard your story or know about your podcast.
Well, yes, I'm a former one of those 1% that sacrificed my health in the name of triathlon success. And the beautiful message presented there is very compelling, and it can be a controversial statement there, but that's what we're going to get into and try to sort out what does it really take to get the most out of your body. And I should mention to the listeners, like I'm sure that there's not a lot of 1% top level triathletes listening. It's most people that are recreational and just trying to do their best, but still very competitive and not want to give anything up. But what I learned from competing on the pro circuit for 9 years, I was an Olympic distance guy back in the late 80s, early 90s, and I was national champion a couple times and ranked number 3 in the world in 91, my best year, won the Coke Grand Prix. So I had a nice journey of reaching some successes in the sport and also struggling and getting my butt kicked and just having the roller coaster of, hitting your peak and doing well and then, falling to injury, illness, burnout, all those kind of things that all the top athletes deal with. And the important thing to understand here for all listeners is that the message that we're going to talk about applies to everyone. Because even if you're not one of the top 1% going for the podium or going for the record or for the Olympic team, we all have to make this decision about balancing our health and our fitness. Mm-hmm. So if you're a busy working guy and you work 47 hours a week and you have family responsibilities and a busy schedule and you're wondering if you should squeeze in an extra workout, it's sort of the same decision-making paradigm as the professional athlete who just woke up from a nap and wonders if he or she should complete that extra workout. So I was the guy waking up from a nap, and one of my quips about my 9-year career was that I was asleep for half the time that I was a professional triathlete because I slept 10 hours every single night without fail, and I had a 2-hour nap just about every afternoon. And if I missed a little bit of that sleep, I could feel it. My swim workout was subpar, and I was complaining about it. So, I had all my time and energy devoted to getting the most out of my workouts and recovering and taking care of every possible injury prevention attribute. And almost nobody can approach the sport that way. But we still have that same stress and rest balance in the background of where to step on the continuum.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I think at the basic level, all athletes are the same in that they need to have a foundation of health and wellness and be able to balance, all the different stresses in their life, whether it's coming from work or family or from training. Being able to even perform, you need to have that foundation of health and balance of stress and stress management.
And Chris, you can relate to the getting 10 hours of sleep a night, right?
I wish I could get 10 hours of sleep a night. Oh Lord, maybe on summer break or winter break I'll be able to get 10 hours of sleep a night, but definitely not during the school year. That's for sure.
Maybe you could do like the sleeping bank account and just like sleep like 13 hours a night when you're not really busy with your job, and then you can cut back a little during the season.
Oh, that would be awesome. I would love if my body worked like that.
Well, speaking of that, it is validated. There's a great book called Lights Out, Sleep, Sugar, and Survival, getting deep into this, our genetic requirements for sleep and our circadian rhythm. And one thing that the authors point out is that during the longer summer months where the days are longer and there's more sun, our circadian rhythms are wired to sleep less and be awake and more energetic in the warmer temperature and longer days. And so what we really want to do with our sleep is not, rigidly adhere to whatever conventional wisdom's recommendation of saying 7.7 hours a night is optimal for humans, because that's bullshit. It's very individualized. I have a high need for sleep that I've carried all the way through my life from when I was a kid, falling asleep at first period in class. And even now, as I'm not a competitive heavy training athlete, but I still need a ton of sleep. And so you have to, adhere to these rules. Like after it gets dark, you want to wind your day down. You want to have minimal light or artificial digital stimulation. and you're priming your body for sleep and the release of the hormone melatonin. So in the summertime, if it gets dark at 9:45 in Portland or 8:45 in LA, you have a lot of leeway there. But in the winter, nowadays, it gets dark at 5 o'clock. You're going to want to wind that down and get much more sleep in the winter than you do in the summer, regardless of all the other variables of how much sleep you need or don't need.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think that book's on my list, and I got to read it because I always talk about how important sleep and rest and recovery are. And Brad, I was listening to I think it was your latest show where you talked about the amount that you actually cut back on training and just all the benefits that it had, and it ties in perfectly to what we're talking about. And so let's start with actually that first part that Chris mentioned, is that there is nothing healthy about training 25 to 35 hours per week. Let's start there. The 25, 35 hours per week, is that even necessary?
Well, I think the question there, you have to factor in the genetics. And so when you see these guys in the winner's circle at the Ironman who are training 25 to 35 hours a week, and you realize that's probably what it takes to, pick up a fat check in the pro field at Ironman. And so these guys have sorted themselves out through the ruthless process of natural selection competition. And so the best guys in the world are also the best adapted to high volume training. And it's really unfair, but Maffetone said this on a recent podcast too. It's like, if we just honored our own best interests and our own genetics and our own stress-rest balance, what would happen would be you'd have a race and there'd be some people in the front, there'd be some people in the middle, and there'd be some people in the back of the pack. And those would be largely influenced by genetics. And so if you want to force your way, if you're a genetic back of the packer and you want to force your way to the middle of the pack, you're going to be making an assortment of probably mistakes and overstress patterns because your body just isn't built for, let's say, high volume training and trying to ascend to those levels that the elites do. So I should throw that in when you're talking about what's the best training and what's too much and what's too little. It's extremely individualized, and that's why we see some people setting world records and others getting injured and sick and burnt out.
Yeah, the genetic linchpin there is that the ability to recover quickly. You have people like Lionel Sanders who can recover incredibly quickly, and that allows him to do so much intensity. If you tried to apply that to another person, they would, get injured in the first week. So it's definitely genetics definitely plays a part to it. But at the same time, I think with genetics, you don't have to, it's not all or nothing. I think there is a spectrum here of your ability to recover, and that's where you fit in within the ability to train, and that's kind of your own ability. That's what you need to find out as an athlete, is how quickly do you recover. But at the same time, there are environmental factors that allow you to speed recovery, such as hormone function, hormone optimization, how much you sleep, nutrition. All of those can overcome some genetic, predispositions to not recover as quickly.
Yeah, I like that. You do the best you can with what you got, for sure, for sure. Yeah, and I think the bigger question when you're putting up the soundbite, there's nothing healthy about training 25 to 35 hours a week, nor consuming 4,000 calories a day, nor skipping social situations to prioritize training. But that's what it takes to get in the top 1%. That's a pretty fair statement, and it's not appealing to most people to squeeze every ounce of potential out of their body. So then we come to not only the genetic component, but what would you call it, like the spiritual or psychological components. Like, what do you want to get out of this passion that you have for endurance sports? And a lot of people that I coached were high performers in real life, in business, and they'd reached a high standard of living from succeeding wildly in everything they've ever tried, whether it's school and business and all that. And so they brought to the sport an extremely strong, intense, competitive mentality. And so all their decision-making processes and all that were governed by, I want to win, I want to get the most out of my body. But it's also okay to say, I want to have fun. I want to mix with my teammates. I want to have a social experience. I want to have a stress release from, the stressful sedentary elements of life, like arguing in the conference room. I want to get out there and bust out a workout. And so there's different decision-making patterns there based on, your goals and your disposition and your personality.
Yeah, to sustain that amount of training, you definitely have to have a large psychological driving force, a passion driving you forward. And usually it's a competitive edge that's doing it, but it's also mixed in with, just love of training. But at some point, that love of training can only go so far. And then your I want to win and I want to be at the top of the podium voice kind of takes over.
I thought you were going to say it has to be mixed in with a big fat paycheck.
Yeah,
that's true. I mean, if you are at the elite end of the spectrum and you rely on getting that paycheck to feed your wife and feed your kids, and also uphold your obligations to sponsors, then yes, that can that will definitely be a motivation.
I want to chip in here from the perspective of being a former professional athlete who put his heart and soul into the sport and was intensely competitive and wanted to win more than anything, and in fact needed to win to pay the mortgage and all those kind of things where I was in that high category of high motivation. It was motivation's not a question with anyone on the pro circuit. Mm-hmm. So if you take you go to a big event like Chicago and there's 50 pros there, and so why is one guy first place and one guy 50th place? We all train, we all sleep 12 hours a day, and we all have everything geared up. We all have a good bicycle to ride on, but then the factors come into your ability to be intuitive and make decisions that might be requiring a balance and a governor on your competitive intensity. And so back to the statement that you have to break free from just loving the training, I'm going to challenge that for a second and say, like, if I didn't have a positive attitude and a cheerful disposition and a strong desire to train and to enjoy the trail or the swimming pool, that workout was not going to be effective. And that workout pattern, that training pattern, was going to cause me to get my ass kicked in the race. And the best athletes that I hung around, the very best athletes in triathlon and professional cycling, like Lance Armstrong, I wrote a whole book about his winning attitude and behavior characteristics called How Lance Does It back in the day before all the nonsense came about. But he was still the greatest champion endurance athlete, among the world has ever seen, with his training and his preparation and all those things. And then all the top triathletes like Mike Pigg, Mark Allen, Andrew McNaughton, all the guys from the old days, they enjoyed the entire process. They enjoyed every workout. They loved the lifestyle. They did not complain about the workload. And I think people get a misconception about pros that, we're soldiers out there grinding away. And if it's pouring rain, we have to zip up our jacket and have this miserable bike ride because we need to get our miles in. And that's very far from the truth, because you're going to go out and you're going to dig it, or you're going to look out the window and go, wow, this is a big storm. I'm going to chill today and go get some more therapy for my knee. It wasn't about who could put the gas pedal on the hardest. And then back to that first place through 50th place on the starting line, some of those guys in the back, there's a little bit of genetic factors that favor those, those top people, but the finish distribution can largely be attributed to lifestyle factors, decision-making factors, ability to control the ego and the competitive intensity, and make good decisions in training and be patient with the process of fitness. So again, I don't care if there's 0 pros listening and it's all recreational people. The same decision-making goes for you. It's like, do you want to make your bronchitis worse by going to the swimming pool because you're expected in lane 7 because you have a social connection there? Or do you want to be disciplined about what you're all about in life and the role model that you project to your family, and take care of your health first before you worry about your ego and your competitive intensity?
Yeah.
Do you think? Go ahead, Kev.
Oh, okay. No, I was going to relate that to, Brad, what you talked about on that last podcast, and I'll find the show. I think it was whatever the last one you did was, but you were talking about this idea of, actually enjoying yourself and not being so rigid to your schedule where it's like, well, I had this plan. It's like Tuesday was my long bike day. And so I have to go through with that, even if I don't really want to. And I think that has a lot to do with this too. And I'm wondering, is that something that is someone at a really super high level? And now, of course, most people listening to this podcast are not at that level. But if someone that is at that high level, are they still training like that? Are they going, well, I was gonna get on my bike for 3 hours today, but I don't really feel like it, so I think I'll just go for a walk instead.
Yeah, if you're good, you should do it.
Yeah,
that's what I feel is the very highest level of sophistication in training, is this ability to inject the intuitive component there and not be robotic and rigid. And again, it's this misconception that, yeah, I have all day to train. There's no excuse for me to ever miss a workout or, depart from my schedule. But the show you're talking about on Primal Endurance Podcast, go check that out. It's the latest published one, and the title is Inconsistency is Key, my training schedule case study. And it's talking about how when I gave myself more and more freedom to depart from a rigid schedule and flake around once in a while, or alternatively, once in a while, push myself beyond the normal limits and restraints that our judging mind has on us, that's when I was able to achieve performance breakthroughs. So that means that if I'm bagging on a few 6-mile runs and a few 20-mile rides in the first quarter of the year because of bad weather or whatever, but once in a while I do a planned 100-mile ride and extend it to 175 just because that's what I felt was the best expression of my talents and contributed to the most success, and also will do so for any other athlete to get, take what your body gives you every day and nothing more. And then once in a while have the freedom and the inspiration to break through and push yourself to become a better athlete.
So along those lines, my question, at the end of the day, though, the work needs to get done. And do you think that the freedom, the benefits that you got with the more flexible schedule, at the end of the day, if you added it all up, the work still got done? Do you think that the flexibility in your schedule relieved some of the stress of being so rigid, and that allowed you to have kind of that fluid and be able to perform better on some workouts, and that balance out, cutting back or skipping workouts at the same time?
Yeah, I get your question, and I think it's a great question to ask because, again, it relates to everybody who they only have Saturday morning to do a long ride. Mm-hmm. So if they start pedaling and they have a sore throat and they turn back, that really sucks because, the pro can turn around and do it in a day's time or 2 days' time. But, here's the thing that I'll counter back is like, I had a lot of pressure on me, man. I was like, people were watching me perform and paying me money or not paying me money based on my results. So every day with my training decisions, it wasn't, cavalier like I was a retired guy living on a boat and, deciding to work out or not. So, I had to ignore or I had to process all those pressures and expectations and still make the best decision. And my favorite decision was to go really hard and do a kick-ass workout and beat my time from the previous week. But when my sore throat was tickling, I had to gain the strength and the trust to back off and know that this was going to pay off later down the road when I beat out a cold instead of struggled for 2 weeks. And so again, with everybody thinking that it's so important to get those workouts in, you're basically at the mercy of a living, breathing, dynamic organism where, your moods, your other stress factors in your life, your diet, your state of emotional health, these things are going to factor into your ability to thrive from training or struggle and go into a tailspin.
So where would you draw the line between mental, like if you start a workout, let's say you're 100% physically, you're not suffering from a cold, you're not suffering from a nagging injury or the beginning of a nagging injury, versus plain old mental fatigue, or if you were just saying, I don't want to do this today, or enjoyment, do you group both of those in the same category and therefore have the same response of, I'm not feeling it today?
Absolutely. Great question. Yeah. And Andrew McNaughton, who's a frequent guest on Primal Endurance Podcast, he says the same thing. Like, it's taken him this long. He's a 54-year-old guy. He was a top pro 30 years ago. He says, my training schedule is dictated by my moods every day. And this represents the highest expression of his ability to train properly and to make the best decisions in training. It's taken him 30 years to get to this point. And now for free, we're dispensing on a podcast the idea that if you let your training decisions be guided by your moods and your desire to train, as Dr. Kelly Starrett says, he's talking about the various physiological biofeedback tools and the heart rate variability and the lactate meters and all these ways that we determine your state of recovery and readiness. He says the number one variable ever discovered is desire to train. This is like laboratory science verified that this is better than anything else they can prick your finger with or strap on your chest. And I'm making this point really strongly because, I mean, if you have to turn off the broadcast and don't listen to anything else and forgot everything, if you just guide yourself, your training decisions by your desire to train, it could represent a huge breakthrough from the traditional approach, which I think is deeply flawed. That's what Primal Endurance is all about, is calling out the bullshit of, the endurance scene where people are stuck on dated concepts, obsessive compulsive behavior tendencies because it's a type A crowd, and all these other things that are leading us down the path of illness, injury, burnout, overtraining. And so if you just back off a little bit and give yourself permission to actually be human and have a human touch here, what's going to happen is you're going to unlock the potential to go and perform better when the time comes that you really want to perform. And it actually doesn't have to be that frequently. I mean, we have this other misconception that, every day, if you miss a day of training, you're going to get out of shape, or if you miss a week, you're going to get out of shape. And the body's really, really good at responding to health promoting activities like sleep and stress management and leisure time and work-life balance. And then, cardiovascular training and high-intensity training. A little goes a very long way in so many ways. And so, getting back to that initial question of 25 to 35 hours a week, if I had 25 to 35 hours a week and I was coaching a young top athlete for $1 million bonus if he could beat other people, I'd take that time and I'd add more time to his sleep or her sleep. I'd put in more foam rolling, stretching, whatever, meditation, things that were complementary to the high intensity or the high volume training, and then allocate, sufficient time to challenging workouts. But it would be a different picture than we see of today, where we think more volume equals more success.
Yeah.
So along those lines, kind of getting back to that 25 to 35 hours a week, with Maffetone training, eventually, if you keep at that threshold, 180 minus your age, and if you keep on at that, and let's say you have, 10 hours a week and you just train at that 180 minus your age rate, eventually, isn't that not enough stress to stimulate a good response for your body? And eventually, don't you have to keep increasing that number bit by bit so that eventually you do get the volume, because you're not stressing the intensity. That volume needs to increase to continue getting that beneficial training stimulus?
Oh, good question. So everybody get that? What he's talking about, 180 minus your age, if you're not familiar, that's the Maffetone formula for aerobic maximum heart rate. So it generally correlates to a pretty easy pace. Mm-hmm. And we're strongly advocating Primal Endurance approach, Phil Maffetone approach, strongly advocating that you spend the great majority of your training time in the aerobic heart rate zones due to the fact that you have endurance goals. And when I say endurance, that's anything over 5K is an endurance event. I mean, the world's great milers, are running 130 miles a week to compete in the Olympics at 1,500 meters and so forth. So, yeah, what's happening if you're jogging all the time and doing easy bike rides instead of the usual a la carte smorgasbord of intervals and tempo and long run here, and then mixing things up with all kinds of different forms of training? What's going to happen if you adhere to the strategy of aerobic base building, aerobic training, is you're going to get faster and faster at that aerobic maximum heart rate. So that's where your development and your progress is going to come. And I detail this passionately in the book Primal Endurance, talking about my own career, where I'd gone for 5 years on the pro circuit. I was training absolutely as hard as I could, slamming myself with difficult, challenging workouts and high volume training weeks, and traveling extensively around the world to the races. And it was exhausting. And yet there were still mofos in front of me on the race course taking my money. And so I had to have a come to the Jesus moment and say, what's going on here? I can't train any harder. I can't put out any more physical energy toward the sport. And yet I need to get faster. I have an intense need to pass up the people in front of me on the race course. And so backing up a little bit, I realized, with the help of Mike Pigg, Mark Allen, Phil Maffetone, Pigg and Allen were the top guys on the circuit, and they had both embraced this slow down to go faster type of strategy, where they reduce the overall stress, the hormonal and physical stress of training, by slowing down the pace and building your aerobic system at a lower heart rate. And what happens when you get more aerobically efficient is that this translates into better performance at all speeds. Mm-hmm. So if I'm jogging along at an 8-minute mile at an aerobic heart rate, and I'm wanting to run 6:15s in the race, I'm going to, those 8-minute mile training runs are going to help me tremendously because I'm building a bigger base from which to launch from. And when it's time to turn it on, and you can search for the shows with Dr. Phil and I on my channel and elsewhere where Maffetone talks, Endurance Planet and stuff, he talks about how aerobic conditioning supports anaerobic performance because those muscles still need oxygen exchange, and the muscle fibers are intertwined in any given muscle. It's a mix of aerobic to anaerobic. So you're building your aerobic system, and the anaerobic muscle fibers don't need a ton of volume of training. So ideally, what you do is you build a base, you get faster and faster at aerobic, and then because you've been progressing so nicely and you're so strong, then you can throw in some speed workouts and benefit tremendously from them because you're so strong and so well built, not only structurally too, like your joints, connective tissue, things that can help you withstand the stress of high intensity training. But unfortunately, we don't have that picture very often. We have people that are just throwing a lot of spaghetti up onto the refrigerator wall and hoping some will stick in terms of, slamming out these high intensity workouts throughout the year, throughout the week. And basically, to close my intensely long monologue, I'm sorry, but you're basically you're fine tuning a crappy Volkswagen engine with new spark plugs and, putting in this and putting in that and bits and pieces, rather than taking the time to build a clean burning, super powerful Tesla electric motor car, right? So there's a big difference when you build a base, you build a bigger engine versus tweaking a small engine.
Yeah.
But to build that base and to build that aerobic, don't you need to increase the volume of that low intensity to keep inducing a training stress response?
Maybe, but that's so far down the line. I'm sorry for giving you a wise ass answer, but I really want to make this point to the listeners. I know you'll forgive me if I sound wise ass, but that's a big fat maybe there, because the big fat maybe comes in we're not even doing the very basic foundation correctly. And so until you can report that you're chomping at the bit and you're succeeding so well with your 10 hours a week at aerobic heart rate, and it's so freaking easy, and you're going faster and faster and faster every time you go to the track and do a maximum aerobic function test for 8 laps, all that stuff, I usually see with every single athlete that I've coached and every single person I've talked to over email and, answered the Q&As on the podcast, most people are nowhere near that. And instead, they'll write letters like, "Dear Brad, love the book. Really cool stuff about aerobic. I've been going with my aerobic heart rate for 3 weeks and I'm not seeing any improvement." It's like, dude, 3 weeks? Are you kidding? And you've been going 7 years of slamming yourself with ill-advised training patterns that lead to overstress. So that's my long answer to the fact that, sure, if you want to get better and you want to win the prize in Ironman in the pro field, you can ask all those guys what they train. And it's extremely impressive and extremely daunting to even think, how does a human do that? But they got there naturally, effortlessly, organically, and they allowed their body to progress, and they allowed to get the most of their genetics. Speaking of that, the Brownlee brothers, who are possibly the greatest physical specimens that the sport of triathlon has seen, and just dominating at Olympic distance, they supposedly train their butts off like every single day. Every workout is super hard, or some semblance of that. They just train really hard. They race really hard. And they also have been known to eat a bunch of junk food in terms of their public profile on magazine or TV interviews. Wow. And so someone asked me about them recently. And it's like, my response to that is like, there's 7.8 billion people on Earth or something. And those two guys are up there, not forget the 1%. It's like 0.00001% to the 10th power. And so certain humans can do stuff and then go down and do a 145 Olympic distance race where they're going from the gun and sprinting the swim, sprinting the bike, including surges, and then running a 29-minute 10K. So I don't think their diet and their whole thing is relevant to many people. But I will say, from people that reach the very top level of performance in all sports, we also want to know, how long are they going to last up there? Yeah. And my good friend Tim DeFrancesco, strength and conditioning coach of the Los Angeles Lakers, he also handles a lot of their nutritional needs and is looking at these greatest athletes on the planet. I mean, NBA basketball, you can't get any more genetically gifted nor athletically skilled. And some of them have short careers in the NBA because they're out partying and taking in substances that don't agree with health and fitness and don't care about diet or peripherals like strength and conditioning as well as they should, because they've just coasted their whole life on their talent. And so if you're a listener and you're thinking, here are my goals. I want to have a good time. I want to make the most of my capabilities, my own potential. And I also want to have some long duration here, so I'm not just a flash in the pan, that's when you have the bigger picture perspective. Then, if there's a gun to my head and I have 6 weeks before I have to, save my life with a performance, you might, take some shortcuts that aren't good for your long-term health.
Yeah, one of the things that I was thinking of when you were talking about this is, and I'm sure you've come across this too, Brad, is the compliance to the 180 formula. I have a group online that we coach, and we introduced the 180 formula, the Maffetone formula, and the reactions were pretty hilarious. Like one guy, he had a race coming up, and I think in like 3 weeks, and he started doing it, and it was like day 2. He's like, "Hey, Kevin, I can't do this. I have to walk. This is ridiculous. I'm never going to be in shape for my race." So I mean, how do you get that mentality? I think is one of the things about this. What we're talking about here today is what I think is needs to change. So, how do you deal with that? Like, what are the things that you kind of get people to understand about this, to get them to accept this, even though they may be walking or crawling or whatever? It's like,
that's a good question. Yeah,
because that's the whole ego kicking in and saying, "Wait a minute, this isn't going to work."
Yeah, it's a tough one. What do? Mark and I write a 334-page book to strongly convince you to, think of a bigger picture than just your ego. But it's a really good thing to be honest about. So I'm glad you brought that up, because in the back of everyone's mind, let's admit that we're highly motivated, goal-oriented, driven people that want to succeed and want to check off boxes on our to-do list every day and feel like we accomplished something in a workout rather than putzed around and walk up hills. And this was a big adjustment for me too. When I first started and had to put the watch on and had to hear the beeper, and I'm like, crap, I feel fine, because the beeper goes off when you feel fine. It's not like a beeper that your heart's about to explode. It's an aerobic limit where you're transitioning from maximum fat burning to more and more glucose, but you can't even feel that much effort. So you kind of have to take a leap of faith and realize that whatever you've been doing to this point probably isn't working that well, because most people can complain about injuries, illness, burnout, lack of performance, or people beating them on the race course. We're not, there's only one winner. Everyone else has the potential to go faster. So if you have an open mind and realize, I'd like to preserve my health while I pursue fitness goals. Nowadays, it's finally coming out. I don't know if you have show notes or listeners can just take this down, but if you go onto YouTube and search the TED Talk for Dr. James O'Keefe, and it's called Run for Your Life, but not very far and at a slow pace. And that's the title of his talk, talking about the cardiac risk factors of extreme endurance training. And when he says extreme, he's talking about, in our terms, moderate. Like anybody over 2.5 hours a week is starting to challenge their cardiovascular health just because of the stress on the heart that going at medium to intensity, not hard, but medium intensity too often, chronic cardio, we call it. And there's another article called One Foot in the Grave, an Outside Magazine, another article called Running on Empty. Actually, One Foot in the Grave might have been New York Times, and Running on Empty, Outside Magazine. But you can Google those and see the fallout in the endurance community from extreme training patterns destroying people's health, and almost tragically, in many cases, with the heart problems that we've seen amongst the elites. And it's no funny business to talk about when you overdo it. So that's one convincing argument to slow down and see if this stuff works. And the second one is to educate yourself and realize that the greatest endurance athletes in every sport for the last 50 years have adhered to this aerobic base building strategy where, Peter Snell in New Zealand, 1960, breaking the world record at 800 meters, coming off of base training, novel new concept, and everybody else all the way to modern times where, the aerobic capacity is kind of the number one performance predictor for all levels of performance, including elites.
So would it be possible to go sub-8 on strictly aerobic development?
Oh, sure. And if you
sub-8 Ironman or sub-2 in the marathon?
Well, to break the world record, you're going to have to you're going to be such a strong machine there, the Tesla, that you certainly can open it up on the freeway and take it up to 130 miles an hour once in a while, and that has a tremendous training effect, and it's very beneficial to have performance breakthroughs. So, of course, base alone is only going to get you so far. And most of the athletes, in question, like Mike Pigg's story in the book is really interesting because he was so fried after 5 years on the circuit, and he had this digestive problem that he couldn't shake. And so he just didn't feel right. And so Maffetone said, you know what? You're not a healthy guy. You're dealing with these illness in your intestinal tract. You need to stay aerobic indefinitely until your health, your basic health parameters start to come around. And so he did every single workout at aerobic heart rate, except for the 11 races that he won on the circuit, undefeated triathlete of the year. So how does that sound I mean, that's a convincing argument that, you're taking care of your body and training. You're not stressing your, glycolytic systems or your hormonal systems with these intense workouts that, are so difficult to recover from and challenge your immune system and all that stuff. And then you're healthy, you're energetic, you have a strong desire to train because your training patterns are low stress. And then you show up at a race and you are allowed to turn on the gas for once and you go and crush everybody. And this, yes, he's an elite athlete. Yes, he had 5 years of experience racing his ass off and training hard coming into this. But for anybody to get the most out of your performance, you want to avoid those overstress patterns at all costs. That's the number one, performance limiter across all ability levels is overdoing it, especially because of that endurance mindset that we've discussed. So most people will thrive staying aerobic indefinitely until all these things are starting to line up with, a 10 out of 10 score on immune health throughout the winter, 10 out of 10 score on your soreness, joint pain, all these things that come from overstress patterns. And then you can throw down some fun, high intensity workouts and benefit.
Makes sense. So as far as, breaking the 2 hour marathon, yes, you have to be. I would definitely agree with you here that you definitely have to be an aerobic machine, for sure, and a highly fine Tesla. But at the same time, you would have to eventually break out of that 180 minus your age and throw in some intensity and be able to drop some low 4 miles.
A good one, and I know we're getting to the end of the show time, so that's a good way to bring it back full circle. And we used to call this FYU workouts. So it stands for F yourself up. And when you're really strong and you're healthy and you want to achieve performance breakthroughs, so you have all these these boxes checked off that your health is good, your motivation, all that, then the body really, really thrives on, stress and rest. I mean, the body will respond to extremely challenging physical efforts by coming back and being stronger. And that's why you see the guys on the bodybuilding magazines, or you see the 202 marathon. It's because these guys have trained themselves beyond imagination how difficult their training patterns are, but they've done it in a responsible way so that they're standing on their own 2 feet on the marathon starting line. They're not in a wheelchair. Get your base, stay away from injuries, upper respiratory infections, fatigue during your workday, and all these things. And then when it's time to go hard, it doesn't even matter like the particulars, because we get so caught up in like, what's better, intervals or tempo, or how often should I do this? And all that stuff is, I think, of minimal significance. And really, it's like, do something that's fun. So get on your bike and try to, ride around your neighborhood or climb the hill as fast as you can and go home. It doesn't have to be a super long duration, high intensity workout, but these things have a tremendous fitness stimulation benefit, and you'll get faster. You'll get fast really, really quick when it is time to throw down those challenging workouts.
Love it. So to kind of go back full circle and back to the article, you would advocate optimize your health first through aerobic training and stress management, and checking out, as you said, checking off all the boxes for your health first. And then once you have reached that point of physical and mental health and clarity, then throw down some fun workouts to induce those stress, fully recover, and repeat.
I appreciate you coming back to that, because something came up to me also. So I want to be straight and open with all the listeners. So then you get to this point, and I'm referencing my own career where I trained super hard. Oh, I made mistakes. I got injured. I got sick. I got better. I got faster. And then all of a sudden I'm at a pretty high level, but I still want to improve 1 minute. And to me, at the top of the pack, just like the article's referencing, it was worth any risk taken to try to go from 4th up to 1st, because the payoff was so much better and the satisfaction is so much better and all that. So in the process of going from, the 99th percentile and bumping it up a bit, you take some risks, and you don't know until after whether the risks will pay off. So I thought I was doing everything with complete sensibility and reasonability and intuition and all the things that I preach, on my show and when I'm a guest on other shows. And then I, come home with my tail between my legs because guess what? In fact, I was overtrained and my lower back seized up at mile 20 on the bike due to the training patterns that were, excessive that I didn't even know about until I got in a race situation and pushed my body to the limit. So you're going to make those mistakes if you're trying to get the most out of your body. And then you have to learn from them and be strategic. And there's no roadmap to the victory circle. That's why only one person wins. But yeah, when you're trying to finally make those final breakthroughs, all kinds of fun stuff comes into play, including who'd you sit next to on the plane and did they sneeze on you? Because that'll blow you out too if you're right on that fine line and you're healthy, but you're a little bit vulnerable. And then some fool gets you sick, then you're bummed because you just lost a good race. And you are straddling that fine line when you're a high performing, forget about an elite athlete, a high performing person who's pushing it hard and has to go to business meetings on jet planes and then do workouts. And so you're going to screw up, you're going to get sick, you're going to get injured. And that's part of the sport. It's sort of like, I think triathlon is just like football, except you get fewer girls in the high school years. But it's a rough sport.
Yeah,
it's tough and it's rough. And it's just like the football player, getting a Charlie horse in his thigh or getting his bell wrong. We get different kinds of injuries. Thank God we don't have too much, but you're going to crash on your bike. You're going to pull muscles. You're going to have an illness that sets you back. You're going to have digestive difficulties, and it's no funny business, especially the more serious you get. So that's why, that health is number one thing. And even in my case, when I was elite racer, if you get a slight cold, it's no big deal. Guess what? You can still fly to Florida and go race. And guess what place I'm going to get? I'm going to get 8th instead of 1st because I have a slight cold. But, 8th, wow, that's still pretty fast. You still went an hour and 49 minutes, but, it sucks because you're trying to reach the very top of your potential. So your health is always number one. And if it's not, then you're completely misunderstanding, the goal of the competitive athlete.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think Chris you have to run here probably right about now. So
I'm going to go to my chiropractor.
Oh yeah. Okay. So we'll wrap it up. We'll wrap it up there. I wanted to mention one more thing that just reminded me when you guys were talking is there's a book that kind of applies to what we're talking about here. It's called Relentless. And I think, Chris, you might have read this book.
Yep.
Yeah. So it kind of features Michael Jordan and Kobe Bryant and these high level athletes. And they talk about like what kind of people they are and what they're going through and all the things all their rituals. And it's so beyond what anybody would really ever want to do that for me, it made me think, well, yeah, I just want to be healthy and fit. Like these kind of like these high level, high performing athletes, you really have to consider what do you want out of this? And most people listening to this podcast, again, are not in the 1%. They're not in the 0.101% either. So it's more about health and enjoyment and fun and being fit. And so that's what we're all about. So,
Yeah, but you know what about those guys? I got to chip in there because you have this perception of Michael and Kobe as these intense competitors, and they were tough on their teammates, and they were tormented and working out at 2 a.m. in an empty gym. But then you see the Warriors last year, and they're about smiling and laughing and joking and being loose and enjoying the experience and enjoying the journey. And I think we have this misconception of the elite athlete is like, Drago in the Rocky IV thing. Where he's got wires plugged in and, he has to, adhere to this thing. And I recall that Rocky beat him, I think. I don't want to be a spoiler, but
spoiler alert.
Yeah, spoiler alert.
Let's make sure that having fun and being healthy does not conflict in any way with being the most intense and successful competitor you can be.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
As you said, it does all come down to wanting to be out there, wanting to go to the pool, wanting to do your workouts. If you don't have that, you're not going to get anywhere. So I think that's a good place to wrap up. It's just, love what you do and do what you love.
There you go.
Beautiful.
A good summary.
Yeah. All right. Well, this has been great. I really enjoyed this. And Chris, thanks for all your input and questions and everything. And Brad,
it's been great.
Yeah. And Brad, thanks for coming on. I really enjoyed it. Really enjoyed having you on the show. And where can people download your podcast? Do you have a website to give out?
Yeah, they should go look at the Primal Endurance Podcast. If you like your show, I think there's a lot of, good content there. And they can look for me at bradkearns.com and link over to the Primal books that we're referring to in the show. So thanks a lot. It was good talking, Kevin and Chris. Good topics to address and think about,
Yeah, we're just scratching the surface. It would be great to have you back on.
It would.
Ah, man.
We didn't even talk about nutrition. So it's like, that's a whole nother,
Yeah.
we could go for hours on that.
I think that's one thing we can agree on, though, for both Brad and myself. So
Yeah.
but that would be a good discussion to have.
For sure.
Okay, let's do it.
All right. Cool, guys. Have a good one. Good luck.
Talk to you later. Enjoy your holidays.
Thanks again. Happy holidays.
Happy holidays.
Yeah. Cheers.
Thanks for listening to another episode covering swimming and triathlon mastery. To get your free online swim clinic, just go to tryswimlessons.com. Give us your name and email, and we'll have session number 1 off to you right away. Begin your process of befriending the swim and laughing at the water